All right. Um, I hope that you hear me okay. Hi, my name is Nima. I'm the founder of Mirage, and I'm here today to talk about privacy that actually people will use. Um, so I have a pretty big privacy problem, right? I've, I've been working in crypto since 2021. I come originally from Iran, and in Iran there is no international banking really because you're separated by sanctions. I mean, that is okay. It's just that there is a constantly devaluing national currency. So you cannot really do any savings. And when I was in 2000, okay, when I was in 2017, I was like 14 at that time. I got introduced to crypto and I got introduced to USDT. So I started to actually buy like $10 of USDT and keep my assets there. But there was a problem. A few years passed and then COVID hit. I was coding and I started to get a job in crypto. It was an IPFS, decentralized hosting platform. I developed open internet services for them in Rust, and they started to pay me in USDC, and that is cool. I really liked it. The only problem was that every single one of my colleagues could see how much money I was earning. I mean, it wasn't really fair because as soon as they got their money, they would send it to a centralized exchange. I really didn't know whose account was which one, you know. I didn't know how much money they were making. But all of my assets, because I didn't really have access to international banking, for example, or I really didn't want to use centralized exchanges that I didn't trust, was unchained. So they could literally see every single transaction that I was making and how much money I had. And that was still okay until I moved to Armenia. So when I was 19, I moved to Armenia for 18 months. And I was living there, and still it was pretty difficult for me to get access to even national banking there, let alone international. And I was still living on my stable coins. There, I used to swap my stable coins for US dollar bills by going to like a shady looking exchange. In person, they would look through the camera. I would like call them on Telegram. They would open the door. I would go inside. I would send them USDT on Tron always, and for some reason. And they would give me US dollar bills, and I would come out, go to Armenian exchange and swap it for like Armenian drums and other currencies that I was using. And that was especially difficult there because those people that I didn't know and I didn't trust and they had physical access to me could see how much money I had in my wallets, and that was totally not okay. I was living there with a security concern that every day I could be mugged because I don't really know these people and I don't speak the language. Like, it was a totally absurd situation. And that was still okay because I found things can work on trust, and fortunately those guys never actually mugged me, so that was okay. And then I went to Germany, and in Germany I got access to international banking. That is amazing. But what happened was that I decided to use the stable coins less and less, crypto less and less actually here, because I just had access to a better system. And as much as we don't like to admit it, I had privacy there, and that's a big deal for me. So, but what is privacy? When we talk about privacy, people have very different ideas. Somebody may think from a contractor perspective that I'm a freelancer, I'm getting my salaries from multiple projects. I don't want them to know what I'm charging each of them. For me, it was like a safety concern at some point. For somebody else, it's just like an ideological thing, and that is good too. But there is a lot of discourse about privacy in crypto. Here you see the screenshot of Tolly, the co-founder of Solana. He very famously said there is lack of PMF for privacy, and in of itself, it's not a killer feature that would change user behavior. And I think I agree with it a little bit, right? When you talk to people, they expect privacy to be a default thing that they can always access. Nobody really knows about transparent transactions. Most people have never done a transparent transaction. They just use banks, and banks are private, at least from the other party. They don't know how much balance you have. But I found that when we are talking about these umbrella terms, such as privacy, we are comparing projects that are really different. They provide different guarantees, and most people may find some guarantees fine. Some of them want something better than that. And there, the gap becomes wider and wider. So I sat down in 2024 and started to think, just from a research perspective, right? What is a privacy protocol that I would use and I would recommend to my friends to use? So I could onboard them to stablecoins too. I found what I need is supposed to be a stablecoin friendly solution. It's supposed to provide no stigma, meaning back then Tornado Cash was sanctioned. If I used Tornado Cash, everybody knew that I used Tornado Cash, and then I would be at greater risk of certain places rejecting my funds. I would carry a stigma that was very difficult to get rid of. And it has to be fast. simply waiting like a few weeks for a transaction because the liquidity pool in a shielded pool doesn't have enough volume, that's not going to work. And more importantly, it should be non-custodial and native, meaning I don't want to trust your random L2 that I've never heard with like stage -1 guarantees to take my funds and at some point rug me, maybe, I don't know, maybe you don't store your keys well. So I trust Ethereum and I trust certain L2s and I trust certain side chains. And whenever I'm interacting with that network, I want to just trust that security guarantee. So I started to look for a solution naturally. I found privacy coins interesting. Many people are using them, and they are pretty cool. There is Monero, there is Zcash, there are some others. But the problem with privacy coins is that if you want to really adopt them for everyday payments, they're going to be volatile. They have a difficult UX that was worse before, now it's nicer. And they don't have really easy ramps. You often need KYC to buy them unless like you get it from somebody on the street or like your friend. They can surely send it to you and it's going to be private. But I find it funny if I have to give up my identity to get some privacy coins. I would just use a bank at that point. So I found that they are pretty cool, and I would use them for certain use cases, but they are really not something that I can use or recommend to my friends. Then I started to look at pools and mixers, and I find shielded pools to be a funny sort of word because you are a mixer, you just don't want to admit that you are a mixer for regulatory reasons, or maybe you are a cleverer mixer for sure, you are like a fancier mixer. You provide ZK address to ZK address transactions, and that is also pretty okay. Some of them are more generic, like Railgun. You can use them to do DeFi operations privately. Now that is pretty insanely cool, actually. But at the end of the day, they share the property of mixer, which you are relying on other users of the same protocol to provide you privacy guarantees. When Tornado Cash enters, you're going to become, like you're going to be potentially in a little bit of trouble, depending on how you look at it. Tornado Cash users were not exactly happy about what happened to their blacklisted funds, and still many places assign a certain risk factor to you when they want to interact with you. So I started to talk to my friends. I started to talk to the people that I knew working in the space about what do you do when it comes to privacy. Most people didn't care really, because they already use a centralized exchange to obfuscate their trace of funds. Some wanted privacy, but they weren't happy with the options. Some used a centralized exchange to get it, and that was a majority of them. For example, a startup paying their employees, they would use a centralized exchange. Some use mixers and privacy coins, but that was a pretty small niche, and the data supports it. Less than 1% of transactions, stablecoin transactions on Ethereum at least, are routed through existing privacy solutions. And that is a big problem, because even the 100% is not 100% of our potential. Stablecoin transactions today, if we have like monthly volume on Ethereum L1 of $5 trillion being just sent back and forth and stuff, that could be much greater if we had privacy. So many people are just giving up on these networks before they even try them because there is no privacy. So I'm interested in providing privacy for real people with real needs today, not tomorrow, that are currently going to banks and exchanges, which is the opposite of crypto to me, to get privacy. I mean, what are we even doing at this point? We've been working on privacy for 10 years, and it's 10 years of Ethereum. I celebrate that. And there's been a lot of research that has gone into it, and I'm pretty happy about that too, because what we are building today is based on that research. But there is still no private payment that a normal person can use, right? You have to go through a lot of hoops to do a simple transaction, and it's pretty freaking difficult at this point. My perspective, when people say that the Ethereum Foundation should do something, and by the way, they've started to do a lot of things. They are supporting Kohaku. They are taking big actions this year to support privacy builders and privacy ecosystems. My reaction to that is that, sure, but we shouldn't wait for the EF to do everything for us. That's a lazy way of thinking about it. At least my engineering mindset cannot accept that. I think we need to 10x the app layer experiments. We need to do everything that we can with security guarantees of Ethereum and using it as a coordination network, and just try to come up with creative designs. I personally found a lot of designs that were from like old forum threads, and somebody had mentioned it somewhere on Twitter, and those were actually pretty feasible in my head, at least. Probably wouldn't be when I started to build them. But there are so many other designs apart from mixers and shielded pools that we can use. So I set a challenge for myself, and that was I want to build something that works on Ethereum today and meets all of my privacy needs at once. So that is non-custodial, doesn't scream privacy seeker, So that is a new guarantee when you think about it. There is no protocol that currently hides the usage itself. You're identified as a protocol user when you use them. It should be native to Ethereum or the underlying blockchain that it operates on. It should be fast, and it shouldn't do any mixing because I don't trust anybody else really. So just out of curiosity, could I make such a thing? And I started to work on a solution, research. It was a me problem with V potential because almost many people, everybody that I talked with had this need. And here's a core idea. They told me I cannot point at these, so I hope that you can follow it with your eyes. Yeah. So the core idea is pretty simple. You can do a private transaction, it turns out, on Ethereum L1 today in 90 seconds, not weeks, not days. And you can do it actually by deploying your own smart contract, which was a crazy idea a few years ago because the gas costs were so high, but Ethereum has scaled. We should leverage that. On L2s, it's much cheaper and much faster, 6 seconds. So the user deploys an escrow contract. So if I want to send $100 to any of you here today, I deploy my own contract that is unique to myself, and I will fund it with $100.20 as a tip, and it's just one transaction. That temporary escrow contract looks different every time that I deploy it. The next thing that happens is that I encrypt my request locally. It's like an intent, right? I want to send $100 to address Nima.if, for example. By the way, that is not my ENS. Nima.if, and I broadcast that encrypted signal to a network of operators who have liquidity to do this transaction actually for me. So what they do is that you see the Nomad node, that is the name of our nodes, they operate multiple EOAs. So there is EOA X here and EOA Y, but there are hundreds of EOAs that each of them operates. So these addresses verify the escrow contract that I deployed. It looks different each time, if you remember. That means that they cannot really trust me that I'm not going to scam them. They could do the transaction for me and I don't pay them. So the engine that we are using here is deterministic, meaning that for the same given inputs, it provides the same output. And they can do an integrity check by getting that data that were used as inputs. They verify the escrow. They post a security deposit. The security deposit here is called a bond. We call it bid, whatever. It gives them an execution rights for like 5 minutes to do a transaction and come back. And what they do next is that they use another EOA that has liquidity, like $100, to send those tokens to the recipient for me. Then they create an inclusion proof. That is it's an MPT proof. They submit it back to the escrow contract, and the escrow contract immediately, trustlessly, just based on the block hash that is available to it from the EVM, verifies that the transaction did actually occur in the canonical chain and releases the amount, the $100, the 20 cents, and the security deposit that they had deposited. If they do not come back, their security deposit is taken. That's how it works, essentially. So when you think about it, it solves a bunch of problems that we've had before. Mixing. There is no mixing here. You are not mixing with 1,000 people. You are mixing with one operator, or you're hoping that their funds are clean. And we get to compliance later. The other thing is your identity is never Mirage user. Nobody should be able to tag you as a Mirage user. Now that is an uphill battle, but it's a battle that is worth fighting because we found out whenever there is a stigma attached to doing something, people stop themselves, prevent themselves from doing that thing. And privacy has a lot of a stigma because you don't want to be seen as a privacy-seeking user. Centralized exchange can ask you for more documentation when you send them funds for no reason, for example, or just outright reject you. The other thing is that you release the money and they take it to the EOA, but they have a way of generating fresh EOA, and these fresh EOAs are totally unlinked to the previous ones. So what you have here is an operator with hundreds of addresses that are doing these transactions for these users, and there is like a little auction system. This is how the app looks today. We are a pretty small team. We are just 3 people, all engineers. We are in closed alpha, so if you want to be whitelisted, just find me after this and I will whitelist you to try the app. We would love to get your thoughts. But we try to make the experience as simple as possible, so you don't have to suddenly write down your secret notes, your new seed phrase, whatever that you need to do traditionally. What you do is essentially you enter the recipient and the amount and the token that you want to send. It looks a bit different for batch transactions. You can do swaps too. And in the next screen, you have to just do 2 transactions. And that is approved if you use USDC or an ERC20 token. If not, it's just if. And you create the escrow contract and you deposit into it. 90 seconds later, your transaction is on Ethereum L1. That is how it works in a nutshell. That is the core idea behind Mirage. We have expanded it. It's pretty flexible because we do not have any component that lives eternally on this underlying network. We can change it, we can fork it, you can fork it, it's open source. So you can make your own version that supports other tokens, not only stable coins. But how well do Mirage smart contracts fit into the broader anonymity set, which is all the smart contracts that are deployed on Ethereum and are not verified? So we created a dashboard for that. We downloaded all of the smart contracts that exist on Ethereum today. It's like 100 million. And turns out less than, 7%, 7.32% of them are actually verified, and 93 million are not verified. Now, when you take out generic ERC20s or the NFT contracts that people deployed in 2021, you get a smaller anonymity set, but it's still in tens of millions of contracts that are genuinely unverified. With AI, we can deobfuscate and disassemble them pretty well, actually, compared to before, but it's still a great many of contracts that you have. And with Mirage, your anonymity set becomes all of the unverified contracts on Ethereum and also all stablecoin activity on Ethereum versus all Mirage users. That can help you with the 90-second thing, so your transactions can happen fast. And this is just one version of Mirage that you can make yourself. There are so many others. So we are currently in closed alpha. The early access is live. It's been live since April, actually. We are validating the privacy guarantees in an adversarial setting that is Ethereum mainnet today. But this summer, we are planning on going live, actually a real public launch. And we are going to support multiple assets, but you can get access today. So you just need to come to me, and I will add your address or email to our whitelist, and you can use it. There are 3 best ways to get involved. If you're a researcher, we are looking for researchers who can help us validate our privacy guarantees with adversarial testing. We are interested in especially researchers who've had experience with formal verification because our code base constantly changes. The traditional audit doesn't work. We are interested in formal verification, fuzz testing, and symbolic execution, just a bunch of other things that we can implement for a constantly evolving code base. If you're a team that is building something that needs privacy, like a stablecoin neobank or any sort of wallet that has a lot of stablecoin usage, we would love to talk with you and just hear your opinion on our SDK that is currently private. We are happy to give you access and help you with the integration and understand what you need when it comes to a privacy protocol. Our early users can be anybody, from a person, just an individual using USDT or USDC for their own finance. We also support ETH, or a team doing payroll with stablecoins. What is in the roadmap until public mainnet is multi-hop transfers, because for the most paranoid users, you don't want to disappoint them. And you want to have like 10 different operators, kind of like Tor, right? Tor does that with your data. There are proxies. There's NIM, there's Hopper, there are mixnets, but we don't have like a mixnet for actual funds today. So we are trying to make that. We are going to introduce multi-hop, swaps, batch transaction, and a ZK circuit in the escrow that makes sure even if somebody reverse engineers a smart contract, your data still is safe inside and cannot be recovered just from that. So we are actually, for today, I had a special plan. I wanted to show a QR code, but we didn't get that in time. But you can come and find me, and I'm happy to send you $20 in ETH from our faucet, sent privately, by the way, so I don't see your address. And you can generate a fresh address too. That's why we are sending ETH. And you can try Mirage today. And I would love to hear how your experience with Mirage is. So I'm happy to answer any questions that if anybody has right now.
Thank you, Nima. Anybody got any questions?
As I was looking at your flow diagram, it looked like money laundering. So can you kind of like walk me through how that would not, or it's not possible for it to be used that way? And then in addition, once the last step where the amount is released from the user and it goes into the Nomad nodes, if the user was a bad actor, now the coins that the Nomad has are polluted. But perhaps I'm not understanding.
No, actually, those are all really good questions, and I think you can ask them for many of the existing solutions out there. So that was the case with Tornado Cash, for example. Very famous, it got sanctioned and blacklisted because it was a money laundering tool at some point when North Korea used it. With Mirage, from a user perspective, your exposure is limited because you are not mixing with anybody else. But you do need to know that the Nomad node is not North Korea itself. And also, the Nomad node operator needs to know that the user is not North Korea. So there is a trust issue here. We do have a compliance layer that is not a KYC thing. It's just more like a KYT, that for users who want to have compliant transactions, that is what we offer. So it checks that you are not a sanctioned entity or your address doesn't have any association with an ongoing investigation or like a hack that is happening in real time. So the Nomad node can decide which operators they trust for compliance, or if they do not want compliance, sure, they can do it their way, but we do not want to be associated with that. The network is decentralized. And the users can decide to use our gateway, our front end, which has a compliance API. And it checks the address of the nomads to make sure that the money that they are getting is also clean. So that's how it works. But the network is forkable, right? We cannot really control who forks it and such, but we can make sure that you never have to associate yourself with them.
During the presentation, you were talking about send inside, that basically smart code is generated then, transitory one. And then at the end, you said that you can send without knowing my address. So then it's about receiving side. So I wonder, how does it then look for me as a recipient UX-wise?
As a recipient, that is interesting because the current flow that I showed here, where was it? Here, that's the sender side, right?
Yeah, exactly.
For the recipient side, what you can do, and by the way, the focus of Mirage is that you do not generate like a self-address. Sure, if you do that, that is even better. But you can just use your ENS address. It is still private, so you don't get liquidity fragmentation. For the recipient way, it would be that we are going to ship a feature that gives you like one-time use addresses for the sender. So the sender sends to actually an escrow contract.
That's what I expected, yes.
Sorry?
That's what I was expecting, yeah, because you didn't show this.
Yeah, exactly. So the sender sends to an escrow contract, right? That either a nomad deployed or they themselves deploy, and then the nomad sends the funds to the recipient. So you still get it in your like public or ENS, just you don't get liquidity fragmentation even.
Okay,
That's how
thank
it
you.
works. Yeah, sure.
Any more questions? I see hands. No, I don't see hands. Well, thank you so much, Nima. Thank you very much, Nima.